What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie, where we believe an experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and back from Peru, world-renowned psychic, Eddie Connor.
Thanks, Tony, and hi, everybody. It's great to be back. We're talking about untold stories in American history today that are guaranteed to rival everything that you learned when you were in school.
We're honored to have Scott Wolter with us today, and Scott is an internationally renowned forensic geologist and host of H2 TV series, America Unearthed.
And just a little bit of background about Scott. He's been the president of the American Petrographic Services since 1990, and he's also responsible for the Independent Petrographic Analysis Testing Laboratory, where the Kensington Runestone was brought in for investigation in 2000.
He's been the principal photographer in more than 5,000 investigations throughout the U.S., Canada, and Puerto Rico, including the evaluation of the fire-damaged concrete at the Pentagon following the attacks on September 11, 2001.
Which means we have another phenomenal show, so please put your hands together and welcome to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie, internationally renowned forensic geologist Scott Wolter.
Scott, how you doing?
Wow, who's that guy you were just talking about?
I know.
He's a superstar.
He's a superhero, I'll tell you.
Hey.
Yeah, well, it sure sounds like it. But anyway, thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on and looking forward to a fun show.
Well, I have to say, when I posted about having you on, so many people responded saying they loved American Unearthed. They've been a fan of yours for years. And so for a lot of people that joined us for the first time that may not know who you are, I'd love to start with how you got started as a geologist, because that's something most people don't really think about going into.
Well, you know what? I mean, I've always been, a fan of nature and rocks and mountains and rivers and beautiful scenes. I mean, I think everybody is. Beautiful natural settings, but really it started for me when I was in college. I went to University of Minnesota at Duluth up on Lake Superior there on a football scholarship, and my focus when I went to school was to play college football, and I did that for 4 years. But my first couple quarters, I joke around, but it's true. I basically majored in I was focused on football and really not so much on school. But in the spring quarter, I took a class called Intro to Geology, and I absolutely loved it. And the reason was I had a professor, a guy by the name of Charles Match, Dr. Match, who was a fantastic professor. He inspired me. He knew his material. He loved his material, and he brought that spark out in me. And I fell in love with geology. And I'll never forget, at the end of the course, he brought me into his office and he said, Mr. Wolter, you kind of have a talent for this geology, but I don't know if you can do it. The old negative sell, right?
Right.
and we used to joke around, and I knew he was playing with me. So I said, well, if I was interested in following up in geology, what could I do next? And he said, well, I'm teaching a 3,000 level geomorphology course next quarter. Maybe you want to try that. So I said, well, I'll think about it. Well, of course, I raced down and I signed up for the class, and I got my first A in college.
Oh,
wow.
And that was it. And I remember at the end of that class, I went up to Charlie and said, Charlie, I would like to have a meeting with you. And he laughed, of course. He said, okay. And we went down to his office, and I said, I might be interested in pursuing this geology, but I'll only do it on one condition. And he looked at me like, you're going to condition? What are you talking about? And I said, I'll do it if you be my advisor.
Wow.
And he said, I'll do it. And that's how I got into geology.
So could you tell me the difference? Because what you do on the television series, it's I mean, a lot of us might think as a archaeologist. Could you tell us the difference between an archaeologist and a geologist? Because so we don't
Sure.
get confused.
It's actually, they kind of sound similar, but they're actually much different. And what we get involved in is we deal with rocks and the process of making rocks through geological processes, volcanism, lava flows and, sedimentation and all that, and then metamorphism, which is the changing of either igneous or igneous or sedimentary rocks into new rocks. And it's very complicated, but everything we deal with has to do with rocks, lava, sediments, the earth. Archaeologists deal with the remains, essentially, of human cultures. So they deal with the artifacts and remains of human activity. They certainly are digging in the earth. They're dealing with lithic or stone artifacts. They're looking at sediments. They're doing mapping. We do a lot of mapping in geology. They do mapping as well. It's not geological mapping, it's mapping of sites. So there are some similarities, but they're really a lot more different than you might think. However, having said that, one of the things that really surprised me when I first started getting into this world of forensic geology dealing with historical artifacts was I just assumed that who spend a large part of their time when they're in the field digging in the dirt, looking at stone artifacts, looking at sites that are in the ground.
Right.
I just assumed that there was a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration between geologists and archaeology. You would think that's a perfect marriage, right?
You would think.
Boy, was I wrong about that. There is little, if any, collaboration. At least that's been my experience. And a lot of that collaboration that I've seen, certainly involving me, has been often hostile. And that has been one of the great disappointments that I've had in this whole arena.
What do you think is at the root of that hostility?
Well, part of it is, how can I say this diplomatically? I think, first of all, one of the things that I think is a common misconception, and I know a lot of archaeologists will get upset when I say this, but it's not a hard science discipline. It's in the humanities disciplines. And so they're not really taught proper scientific method. Now, some of them do a good job with scientific method, but I can tell you firsthand, I have seen where they make a lot of mistakes. They make a lot of assumptions that they, quite frankly, just should not make. And it's because I think they don't fully understand what that process is. Now, I can just hear them right now groaning and saying, well, what do you mean? Well, then why is it that many of them will weigh in on subjects when it's simply not appropriate for them? In the case of, for example, the Kensington Runestone, there is no archaeological aspects that any archaeologist can talk about, yet they're the ones that seem to be weighing in on the discussion more than anybody. And quite frankly, they have nothing to talk about. And this gets into the whole realm where if I don't know something about a particular discipline or an aspect of a discipline that has to do with the subject that I'm working on, I'm not going to sit there and tell a doctor anything about medicine.
Right.
And this is what I see a lot of, not just archaeologists, but other people in different disciplines do. And it's just not appropriate. But at the end of the day, this is one of the things that has led to this problem that we have of still, for me, it's like, are we still talking about the Kensington Runestone being a hoax? Really? I forget sometimes that is the prevailing wisdom or the thought of a lot of people in these various disciplines outside of geology.
Do you think sometimes also that there's just that small handful of people, and they're in every walk of life, that if you have a spotlight on you and you're doing integrous work and you're sincere about that which you are presenting to the world, there's always that one or two people that A, want to jump on your coattails, or B, jump in the spotlight a little bit just to get a little bit of attention, even though it might not be appropriate.
Well, certainly that goes on. There's no question that goes on. And I think what you're talking about is something that I talk about all the time, and that is that aspects of the human condition, and we all know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Things that are not necessarily the things that we like to brag about in our personalities and our being humans, get in the way of every aspect of our lives way more than they should. But it's just the way the world works. And I say to people all the time, how you handle yourself in given situations, the way you respond as a human being will dictate what the outcome is going to be. And sometimes the way you respond, if it's not appropriate, can put you in a very bad situation, or in some extreme cases, it can get you killed. I'll give you an example. If you get pulled over by law enforcement for whatever reason, how you interact with that officer when he comes to your door, how you respond will dictate how that situation ends up, or play a big role in that. And I think you know what I mean.
Yeah,
totally,
100%.
Well, Scott, I want to ask you, because I grew up in Kansas. Eddie grew up in North Carolina, and in Kansas,
I'm sorry.
I know. But in fact, I did for a brief time did a lot of classes in geology, but I also had a fascination about archaeologists and ancient sites, and so I wanted to find out, as a geologist, when was that transition? Not really a transition, but when was the fascination for you for especially sites in America? You have American Unearthed, but when was your fascination? When did it begin for like the Kensington? And I know you talk a lot about pre-Columbus. So when did that start?
Well, it started in 2000 with the Kensington Runestone, when it was brought to my lab by, I was approached by the Runestone Museum to do a geological examination of the stone. And at the time, I'd never heard of it before. And it's kind of a surprise, because just about anybody who's spent as much time in their life as I have, starting from when I was 1.5 years old. I was born in Florida. My dad was in the military. He was a SAC pilot, and married my mother, and then got a job with Northwest Airlines. We're based here in Minneapolis back in the day. But I don't understand why I didn't know about it. I must have missed school that day, is what I jokingly say to people, but I didn't know what they were talking about. And it was an interesting story, and that's cool and everything, but I didn't really fully understand or appreciate it. And part of the reason for that is that we do all kinds of investigations. You talked a little bit about the fact we worked at the Pentagon. I've worked on murder cases. I've worked on every type of construction project you can imagine. And they only call us when something goes wrong.
Right.
And our job is to figure out what the problem is, what caused it, and then what they really want to know is whose fault is it. So doing forensic investigations is something I've done for 31 years now, and it's second nature to me. We get a lot of interesting projects, so this thing was certainly different. It was interesting, but to be quite honest with you, I wasn't all that enamored with it in the beginning. And it was a challenge. It was something new, and that's great, because it's like a lot of people in their jobs, they end up doing a lot of routine work on a day-to-day basis. It's sort of the interesting stuff that's different or challenging that you remember and you look forward to. So we went ahead and did this work, and actually I thought we did a hell of a good job with the weathering study and the tombstones and comparing the weathering, and the weathering was old. And the other thing I think that people don't realize in forensics is that we employ logic. Logic makes life so easy if you use it. And the logic was, it's either old and it's genuine, or it's modern and it's a hoax. And those are really the only two things.
So take us back to the Pentagon. We did speak about in the introduction a little bit, you including the evaluation of fire damage concrete at the Pentagon associated with September the 11th. Can you talk about that just a little bit, what you unearthed, what you uncovered, and what your hypothesis is about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, that was, I think, when they put me in the ground and they're talking about me at my eulogy, I think that's the thing that I'll probably be remembered for more than anything. And quite frankly, it's probably the work that I'm the most proud of and you know, honored and privileged to be involved in that. It was a horrible day for everybody, but to be able to actually do something and help was really great. But anyway, what they wanted us to do was to evaluate all of the structural beams and columns, steel reinforced concrete beams and columns that had been impacted by the jet fuel fire. And our job was to determine if certain temperatures were reached at certain levels within the concrete. If 573 degrees Celsius had reached about 2 inches into the concrete, which is where the structural steel was, at those temperatures, steel loses its yield and the strength of the column is destroyed. So those had to come out. So every one that we identified that the temperatures had been reached at that level, we had to tear that column out. The other ones could maybe be repaired. Some were left alone. And the whole idea was to do a surgical repair. What happened is we documented that there was a lot more fire damage in many more of these structural elements than they realized. So they just decided, to heck with it. We're going to tear it all out and start over. And that was the result of the work we did. And actually, I thought it was a good decision because it made the reconstruction of the Pentagon faster, easier, it was cheaper, and most importantly, it was safer.
And so whenever you speak with other people, conspiracy theorists, etc., I want to fall back to the great word you used, which was logic. When you hear them babbling on and on about certain aspects of the Pentagon, mind you, they weren't there, they didn't see it, they didn't touch it, they weren't, you know, how do you respond to people like that go, it couldn't have been a plane that crashed into it or it would have disintegrated the whole state? I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, you know, look, I'd be a hypocrite if I sat here and said that these people are conspiracy theorists and they're crazy and they don't know what they're talking about. Because look, nobody loves a good conspiracy more than me. I mean, let's be honest here. However, you better bring something tangible, some hard factual evidence to support this conspiracy theory. Otherwise, I'm not interested. So I understand where people have questions. Do I have some distrust within our government? Do I think people have a logical and legitimate reason for questioning some of the things that happen in the world and within our own government? Absolutely. Do I think it's as bad as some people think? No. I mean, nothing ever is. But I don't criticize these people for asking questions. And I have been asked many times by people who are a member of what they called, I remember many of them said they were members of the patriot community, whatever that is. Like, I'm not a patriot. I love my country. But anyway, so what I do is I tell them, I say, look, if you want to ask me questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And here's what I tell them. I'll say, first of all, for 4 years, I wasn't able to show pictures of pieces of the plane because it was classified information, and I didn't show those pictures. But I do now when I give lectures. I remember the first box of samples that came to my lab. I had just walked inside the building. I hadn't even come down the hallway to go to my office, and I could smell the jet fuel in that box.
Wow.
For 3.5 months that we worked on those samples, I could smell jet fuel. Now, maybe they sent a terrorist bomb in, and then somebody went in with a bunch of airline jet fuel and doused it all over the building. I don't think so. I have very close friends who were first responders that were there within minutes and worked on the site for 7 straight days. I know these guys. I've worked with them for years. They told me, and I saw pictures of everything that they saw. And then I was out there myself. So it was I can tell you what happened at the Pentagon. What happened at Ground Zero up in New York, I cannot tell you because I wasn't there. I'm very suspicious of the videos that I've seen of Building 7 when it came down. It certainly looked like a controlled demolition to me, but I wasn't there, so I can't speak to that. But what happened at the Pentagon was the 767 with 64 passengers and crew hit that building on the west side in the Wedge 1 area, and
wow,
that's what happened.
Wow. I think it's healthy to be skeptical. I think it's healthy to ask great questions. I think it's healthier to ask questions that make people uncomfortable than it is just to keep your mouth shut and walk forward and do what you're told and drink the Kool-Aid. I really do.
Well, you know what? That's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
That's what I did on the show. It's second nature to me. I mean, I try to be sensitive to people's feelings, and I try to read the people that I'm interacting with. And you know, we all have our spidey sense or our intuition that tells us if somebody's being straight with us or not.
Yeah.
And I like to think that mine works most of the time. But you know, just treat people the way you want to be treated. Ask them. You know, I've always been taught if you have an issue with somebody, you got a problem with someone, go to the source.
Right.
Talk to the person. And if someone's got a problem with me, don't talk to some other clown and have him come around and tell me, you know, so-and-so thinks you're a jerk. Tell me yourself.
Right.
Okay, if you don't like me just because you don't like me, well, I can't do anything about that. I'm sorry. And you go on your way. But if you have a problem with me or something you think that I've done, ask me about it. And how many times when we have issues with people, they have bad information.
Yes.
What they think you did
True.
or what they think you said is not what you said, or you didn't do that thing.
Well,
I mean, that's most of the time, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, look at the news today. There's an entire industry in the media, Hollywood industry, as well as the news industry that's built on exactly what you just described.
It's true.
So it is pulled way away from facts and science and legitimate information to Kim Kardashian split her damn dress today at the Academy Awards. Who cares? You know, give us.
Oh God, I can't tell you how little I care about that kind of stuff. Kardashians and Kanye. The only reason I'm aware of it at all is because I have a 22-year-old daughter and my wife. They sit down and they watch that stuff together, and I said, "Why do you watch those shows? It's terrible. I mean, why do you promote that? Oh, we just want to watch it. It's like a train wreck." And I'm like, "Oh my God,
Then go watch
these
it.
are my women here. They're watching this. It's making me crazy."
But it's so much more fun to watch an actual train wreck.
It's true. It is true.
Exactly. I don't know. But hey, listen, you know what? To each his own. I'm not going to sit there and judge people. You know, people, look, I love rocks, okay? What do you think a lot of people think about me? You love rocks? We're happy for you.
Yeah.
Go get them, cowboy.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break. We have to do our sponsors, but when we get back, I want to find out what led up to American Unearthed, and then some of the stuff that that you researched, and I have to say some of that was amazing research that you did, and a journey you took us on for those 3 seasons. So this is Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Eddie Connor.
And you're listening to Scott Wolter right here on Truth Be Told. He is an internationally renowned forensic geologist, and we're going to be right back with more. Don't go anywhere. You suffer from anxiety, from depression, maybe even chronic pain? Well, listen up. Truth Be Told is going to tell you about a breakthrough program built on over 100 years of therapies used in America's returning veterans to help you successfully overcome PTSD, anxiety attacks, pain, and depression. The secret proven in study after study. Music therapy. The effects of music are nothing short of amazing. From strokes to PTSD, music has been shown to improve the quality of life. Now, one of the latest music therapy programs being used in America's veteran hospitals can be yours to experience for free at home and to help your own anxiety attacks, pain, and depression. Or just relax after a hard day. It's called Whole Tones. It takes music therapy to a new level. This revolutionary program makes use of specifically designed frequencies that have been shown to stimulate your body's natural healing power down to a cellular level. If it works for battle-scarred vets, can it work for you? Well, experience it for yourself for free at sweetwholetones.com. Like Tony Sweet, that's SWEET. Go to sweetwholetones.com. Now enjoy the show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Eddie Connor.
And I'm Tony Sweet.
And with us today, we have internationally renowned forensic geologist Scott Wolter with us. We've been talking a little bit about the Kensington Runestone, which was fabulous and fascinating, and a little bit about the Pentagon and the plane that crashed into it on September the 11th, 2001. And I'm going to turn it back over to Tony because he's got some great questions for Scott, and we have visual aids with us today.
That's right.
Oh, boy.
Well, I want to find out before you were approached, and I want to find out about how that was, how they approached you on this television idea. But up to that time, how did you start getting into after the Kensington Runestone? Did you go to more research sites around the country, or what did you do to get more involved in the archaeological part of it?
Right. Well, actually, I dove into the Runestone, and really the obsession, I guess is what I should probably call it, came after I released my report where I said that the weathering was old and that it had to be genuine. And then I was attacked.
Wow.
I was by the academic community, and at first I was puzzled, and then I got pissed because I just, it's like, okay, well, then what are your complaints? Well, everybody knows it's a hoax. Well, that's not a response. I said, that's nothing. I said, what about my geology? What specifically did you have a problem with? Well, of course, these are people that are not in geology. The geologists all agreed with me. It was people in archaeology and history and language and runology and anthropology that were saying, no, this couldn't be. And I'm like, well, that's not an answer. And so and some of it got nasty. So it really prompted me to want to understand more about the story, about, the players involved, the research, the history of the investigations. The first thing I found out was that the first state geologist of Minnesota, a giant in our field, Professor Newton Winchell, who I knew very well from college, I did not know that in 1909 he studied the Kensington Runestone.
Oh, wow.
And of course I went, uh-oh. Oh, boy, what if he came to a different conclusion? My life is over, right? I'll give you an example of this guy. The University of Minnesota Geology Department is called Winchell Hall. Okay, that's who this guy is.
Pretty big.
And so I dove in and I looked at his research, and he concluded after doing his own weathering study that it was genuine.
Wow.
And so what had happened was that I had independently replicated his work. And that's the way it works in science.
Yes.
And so
Right.
I use this as an example. Well, that was interesting to me. I also learned a lot more about Professor Winchell, and then I started to learn more about the whole history of it. And then I learned that there were more runestones that had been found, a whole bunch of them in this country. And then I started researching those, and then I learned about the Newport Tower, and then I started to learn about all this pre-Columbian stuff that suggested many cultures were here, not just the Templars or the Venus families, but cultures that date back thousands of years. And from a logical standpoint, just from an open, and I don't know if I'm open-minded or not. Every time I do an investigation, it's a blank slate. And, you let the evidence drive the investigation, and that's what I did with the Runestone. That's what I do with all my investigations. And so as I began to learn more and more about all these other artifacts, this is how and then I learned about people like Barry Fell, who had done a lot of really good research, and some of the research he did I didn't think was as good, which unfortunately I think diminished his credibility somewhat because he overreached in some cases. I know people have accused me of that, but I say to them, show me the evidence that I overreached. And I never get an answer, or I'll just get declarative statements without any facts to support them. This is what I call debunker mentality, and
right.
there's plenty of those guys out there, but this doesn't help this doesn't help the situation. This doesn't help us get to truth when you have certain people that get more attention than they deserve, that simply take a negative position, and they defend that to the hilt with usually little, if any, evidence. And it's frustrating because, you know, when I look at something like the Runestone or many of these other artifacts and the evidence that we have found that exists, if this was argued in a court of law, it'd be a slam dunk. But yet here we are. And the prevailing wisdom is that it's a hoax. And it's mind-boggling to me because in the professional world, it doesn't work that way. But
right.
in the academic world, it's free-for-all.
Do you sometimes wonder if there are people behind those people that are blathering on and on about what a hoax it is? Or sometimes, in your opinion, Scott, do you think there are people behind them that are putting them up to it for some?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll give you an example.
Please do.
Wikipedia. Doug Weller in England he's a squatter. He's sanitizing all the sites that have and artifacts that have to do with pre-Columbian contact. This is a fact, okay? And I'm not bragging. It just is. I have done more scientific work on the Kensington Runestone than anybody in its 118-year history. That's a fact. I've written 3 books. I'm writing my 4th book that deal either totally or in large part with the Kensington Runestone. I've studied the artifact. It's been in my lab numerous times. I've been everywhere. Yet my name isn't even mentioned on the Wikipedia site. None of my books are cited.
Wow.
0. I've been sanitized. Now, I don't particularly care because I think people have caught on that Wiki is not reliable.
Right.
Yeah,
but there are people that are, and he's the puppet master for Wikipedia, that sanitize these sites. And they do it in a condescending, I mean, you wouldn't believe it. I had arguments with some of these editors, and they are so condescending and disrespectful, it's unbelievable. And they ridicule and mock you. And then I've had to threaten legal action because my Wikipedia, I had a wiki bio page, and I demanded they take it down because there was stuff on there that was simply not true. I said, look, take this stuff off. Well, no, we're not. I go, well, guess what? Then I'm going to sue you, get rid of my bio. I don't care if people can't find my bio on Wikipedia. Right. I'm not doing television because I want to be famous. I'm doing television because I want the world to know about these artifacts. I want them to know that there's a history to not just this continent, but to the world that they don't know anything about, that has been suppressed and continues to be suppressed. So the long answer to your question is yes. There are people that are working behind the scenes to whitewash this whole thing.
Which is such BS.
Well, it's BS.
Of course it's BS. And that's part of the reason why we did America Unearthed. That's why we are going to continue to go forward with this effort. I don't know if you guys heard, but we just launched a new company today with Hutton Pulitzer.
No.
He and I have partnered, and we call our new company Explore, spelled capital XPLRR. Go Explore. And we're going to make shows ourselves. I'm not going to work for the networks anymore because the networks, quite frankly, don't care.
That's
Well,
it's
all about ratings. It's about making money.
And how many people? How many people have you ever watched started out in TV and that sort of thing, and then they get sort of thrown off the side of the train repeatedly. And like you're coming from a place of integrity. And you were talking about earlier, you said, I don't know if I'm optimistic or not. I think you do have that clean slate. I think you're open-hearted, and I think you bring that passion and authenticity to the table. And that's why you're kind of contagious to listen to and to watch.
And that's going to say, and that's why watching you on the series, I could see, it was honestly, when I watched, it was like a boy in a candy store.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm the same way when it comes to certain things where I get so excited about this stuff. And so when I saw that, that's what I was so drawn to you and your show, is because of that, and the topics that you chose and your determination to really instill in us. Like I said, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, Eddie's 60s, 70s. Didn't mean to tell your age there, Eddie. But
I don't mind. I'm 57, and I've earned every gray hair that I have left. So
but
I'm not worried about my age.
Right, but we didn't hear this stuff. We did not hear this stuff in school. We heard about just the Constitution, the Declaration,
and Columbus discovered America. Blah blah blah.
But
Indians are savages.
This was so fascinating to me, and so I do want to talk a little bit, because the time's going so fast, and I want to get this in because. How did you choose the topics for each episode? Did they choose, or did you have a say in it?
Oh, I definitely had a say. And, while we're talking about America Unearthed, I have to tip my hat to Committee Films and Andy and Maria Oz, who were the owners and the drivers behind that company. They're our personal friends. They live just a few miles away from us here. The production company was just down the street. It was a wonderful collaboration. The people I worked with were fantastic. We all became very close, and I think that was a reflection of why the show did well, is because we really had a fantastic group. And I would say that about a third of the episodes were, maybe a little more, were what I call my stuff. A third of it was the production company would come up with ideas, and they would run them by us, and we would all have input. And then a third was from the network. And quite frankly, the stuff that came from the network, I'm not trying to pick on the network, were not the stuff that I would have picked.
And I could tell.
For example, I'm not a Bigfoot guy. I know a lot of people have seen Bigfoot, but what I said to the production company and to the network, I said, look, I'll do this episode, but unless I see a Bigfoot, see a body, or a skeleton, or shake his hand, I'm going in a skeptic, I'm going out a skeptic. And that's what happened. I gave it my best. And I have to tell you that the people that I talked to, I absolutely 100% believe that they believe that they saw Bigfoot.
Yep.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they saw Bigfoot,
right?
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But
totally.
I believe that they believe they did.
So the great thing about, and not so great thing about network, is we've been in and out of network for 20, 21, 22 years now. And I'm not dogging network either, but more often than not, God, you hear my southern accent came out.
It was really bad.
It was a 3-syllable word.
More
often than not, they are so lazy in their thinking, or let's throw a Bigfoot in there, that'll get the ratings up. It's just lazy programming, in my opinion. But people respond to sincerity, and what you have, Scott, is leaps and bounds of sincerity that just oozes out of you. And like we said earlier, it's genuinely contagious for us to watch and stay engaged with. So we're thrilled about this Go Explore. It's going to be fabulous.
So,
I can tell you this: I never mailed it in, and everybody on the crew worked just as hard as I did. And it was hard work, because we went to some pretty challenging sites. We dealt with all kinds of weather and terrains and critters and everything else. And it wasn't an easy show to do, but every day that we did it, I knew I was living a dream. I knew that one day it would end. I didn't think it would end as quickly as it did.
Right.
But I can tell you this. The two highest rated shows we had for the 3 seasons that we went, the 39 episodes we did, were the last 2. And the final episode was by far the highest rated episode of all 3 seasons. So if you're going to go out, that's the way to go out.
That's right.
And so it was great. And I mean, I miss it. And it wasn't because they canceled the show. They sold the channel.
Oh wow, okay.
They sold H2, and so they put us on hold, and then we just assumed, we were the number 1 show, and we thought, well, they'll just take us over to history, right? Well, my agent told me that our show was too smart for history.
I was going to say.
Really?
I swear to God, that's what I was going to
Wow.
say. It's
I'm
too
telling you,
sophisticated, too on
he'd
point.
probably be pissed at me for saying that, but it's the truth.
It is true.
And
Wow.
you know what? If you watch the programming, he's right.
Well, I have to
And
say, I'm a big History Channel fan, but there are a
makes
lot
sense.
of programs that you're like, it doesn't make sense why they're showing.
Well, some of it's lazy.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
I think it is just trying to do filler. But and I'm glad you said that, because I just watched the last 2 episodes last night, and about the Templars,
Yeah.
and I loved that episode because, again, you brought some people in with you that were, again, just excited as you are. And you got to travel all over the world, which is
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
amazing. So,
Yeah.
honestly, let's talk about that just for the last few minutes we have here about the Templars. Do you feel that they were here before Columbus? Because that's very important.
Of course they were. And by the way, Columbus, you mean that guy that never set foot on the continent that already
Right.
had millions of people living here?
Right.
That guy?
Thank you.
They
Yeah,
say
that
it gets
one.
a holiday.
I mean, what a joke. But do I believe the Templars are here? I know the Templars were here. I know they were. And the reason I know is because of things like the Kensington Runestone, the Newport Tower, the Spirit Pond Runestones, the Narragansett Runestone. It goes on and on. But, you know, there's something that I've been talking about now for the last few years that I'm amazed. I'm stunned and amazed that nobody has ever talked about. If people were coming over here, and I'm not just talking about the Templars, I'm talking about the Welsh, I'm talking about the Norse, I'm talking about the Phoenicians, whoever, okay? Don't you think they would have encountered the people that were living here?
Of course.
Do you think maybe the natives might know something about that? Well, they do. And the question is, why don't they want to talk to archaeologists and anthropologists, the people that were digging in their mounds and, you know, putting their ancestors' remains in museums and into boxes, and they hate them.
I bet.
They hate those people.
Of course.
And because they've told me that. And so when I come forward and I tell them that the Templars, who shared a similar ideology with the natives, who had successful operations here in North America, they did it quietly, they did it secretly. Guess what? Just because we don't have a document written down that tells us everything that they did over here, it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
Okay? And in context with the situation, they're not going to tell anyone what the heck they were doing.
Right.
And the natives, you got to understand something too about the natives. I was just out on the East Coast here a month ago, and I dealt with a good friend, Chief Black Eagle with the Wampanoag tribe, that was basically where the Newport Tower is. That's their territory.
Right.
And I asked him, and I recorded it. I said, "Can I record this?" He said, "Sure." I said, "What did you do when the white people came?"
Wow.
He looked at me and he said, "We beat the S out of them." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we had to find out if they were tough."
Huh.
He said, "The ones that survived, we took them in. They became part of our tribe. The others, we buried them." I'm like, "Really?" He said, "Really. We killed them." And he said, "You have to understand something. You don't operate on this continent back at that time unless you have a wampum, a pass that you can give to the next tribe that tells you you have the right to operate here. You have permission to be here." And I asked him, "Who built the Newport Tower?" He said, "Prince Henry Sinclair and his people when they came through here." That's what he said. I've got it recorded. And this doesn't surprise me at all.
Mm-mm.
In one of my books, I wrote about the secret society of the natives, of the Algonquin tribes. It's called the Medewin Society. We call it the Grand Medicine Society. Those degrees that they go through, their longhouses, their ritual chambers that they build are exactly the same as Masonic Templar rituals. Not similar, the same. So how can that be?
So, Scott, before we go, we literally have like 5 or 7 minutes. Tony's going to jump to pictures, but I have a unique question here. Do you feel like everything you're describing here with the Native Americans, especially here in North America. Do you think that what you're talking about right now was part of the impetus for the white men, meaning the government, to come in and wipe them out and turn that into the biggest genocide we've ever known in humanity?
What do you think?
Yes.
100%.
Of course.
100%. That's
Look, the Templars warned the natives
yeah.
that the Christians were coming and it wasn't going to be good.
Wow.
That was why. And here's an interesting thing. I'll try to wrap this up quick. I know you're going to commercial, but around 1300s is when the Native Americans abandoned their cities, the Hokia and the Ohio Mound Works and so on, all across this country. The reason was they were warned by the Templars that the whites were coming. And that was the prophecy that they had, that they felt was the only way that they would survive. Now, the archaeologists say, well, they left their cities because they overhunted, they overfished, and they cut down all the trees.
Lazy.
Does that make any sense to you?
Not
at
a
all.
damn bit of sense.
Not
It's a
at
bunch
all.
of BS.
It is.
So now you understand where the conflict comes in, and then Scott Wolter walks in and tries to tell the archaeologists and the historians the way the history really was, and that they were wrong about everything from the get-go. How do you think that's going to go down?
Not good, but great, because that puts you on your own network doing Go Explore. And then we have to have you back and talk to us
please.
more
Wait a
about...
minute, I thought we were going for 2 hours.
Oh, just we only have you for 50 minutes, but this is what sucks, because I'm excited about
I
we're just
know.
now getting good. Okay, so
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I was all set to go for 2 hours.
Oh.
Geez, that's all right. We'll have to do this again.
no, please.
Please.
What you need to do is we need to talk about getting yourself your own podcast or your own podcast, because so many people, in fact, people in the chat room are asking
going
questions.
crazy.
And I'm trying to get to one or two, but unfortunately we're running out of time. But I want to show these pictures that you sent. One is under the water. Tell us what the under the water
That's the 110-pound silver bar if you talk to Barry Clifford, or lead bar if you talk to UNESCO. And it's amazing. I'll tell you, for my purposes on the show, and we're talking about the show I did last year
Right.
On History Channel, Pirate Treasure of the Knights Templar. For my purposes, it was the symbols that were carved on the bar. It doesn't make any difference to me personally if it's silver or lead. And quite frankly, if you look at the context of 1700, which is when this silver bar or lead bar was cast, in the pirate culture, you could make an argument that lead, which they use for shot in their guns and their pistols, was more important than silver. In fact, we know that some of the pirates and some of the other privateers would use silver as ballast in their ships. So, UNESCO used it to try to demean Barry and the work that he was doing in Madagascar. But the point is, if you look at it in proper context, they're about the same. They're worth about the same. So it's just nonsense. But for me, it was the symbols on the bar that led to some amazing discoveries. And all that stuff you saw on that show happened as it happened. It was just amazing. And I'll tell you what, if I'm going to give myself credit, we went 3 days in Goa, India. We went to all the religious houses. We went to the ruins of the old monastery. That's where I found those grave slabs. That was pretty good stuff, I have to say.
Well, Pat, we'll lend our hands so we can all three give you a pat on the back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, pat me on the back here. Wait a minute, I just hurt my arm.
Well, okay, we'll do one more, and then unfortunately we got to get going. But please, will you promise to come back?
Please.
Yeah, we're just getting started here.
I know.
Come on.
All right, so I'm going to show one more picture here that you sent. It looks like it's at night. It's a big slab of rock. There's lights, and there's about 5 people around this rock.
Oh my gosh, that one is a tough one. That is the Judaculla rock, which is, and this is so funny because I had people coming after me and they were getting mad at me, and I go, did you watch the show? They're saying, well, you're saying, and there was a certain faction within the Eastern Band of Cherokee that did not want us to do some filming. And funny, an archaeologist tried to get us banned from getting access to film at the site. He wasn't successful. He was a complete jerk. But anyway, the point is that we kind of let it. We asked the question: could this have been made by a European culture? And in the end, the answer was no. I said this is a Cherokee artifact. Of course, I got criticized anyway because I even suggested that white man could. Well, I can ask the damn question. I mean, they get mad at you no matter what you do. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to say, and this is a sad thing, just recently, within the last few weeks, that rock was desecrated, spray painted by some young donkey who went there and spray painted all the interpretive displays. They just finished a beautiful interpretive display and a walkway that was and he spray painted the rock itself. He was arrested, though, and he's being prosecuted.
He should be.
This is why we need to preserve and protect these artifacts.
Yes.
And if I just want to say one thing, the reason I get upset with these academics and the archaeologists and the people that we're fighting against is because their dismissal of these artifacts renders these things unimportant, right?
Yeah.
The fact is they don't know what they're talking about. They have no idea if they're real or not. And so until we know with 100% certainty, we have got to protect them against things like this vandalism, or somebody taking a hammer and chisel and carving their initials like happened out in Montana, where Meriwether Lewis carved his initials. Some young guy carved his, initials and his girlfriend. So this is a serious thing. It's a big part of the problem, and I cannot for the life of me understand why these scholars do not see the wisdom of protecting these things until we know with absolute certainty what they are.
Amen to that.
I
Well,
agree.
this is Scott Wolter, part 1. Part 2 is going to be coming up because we have so much more to talk about. Scott, thank you so much.
Yay!
I know.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I know you got to go, but let's do it again soon. I had a blast.
Oh, no,
Awesome.
this
We
is
did too.
great.
Thanks,
And we
Scott.
appreciate it. Go to scottwalteranswers.blogspot.com. You can check out all kinds of interesting things that Scott talks about on his blog. So please do that, and we'll talk to you soon, Scott.
All right, guys. Thanks again.
You
Thanks.
bet. Talk to you
Okay.
later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, my God, Eddie.
I know.
Oh my God, this is one of those nights that I love. I love it. I love it. Well, we're going to take a break. If you guys just tuned in, if you want to watch this whole episode again, you can watch it on YouTube. Please subscribe. We have over 4,000, almost 400 subscribers now. We want to thank every single one of you for doing that and following us and being supportive. And if you have any guests that you want to have on the show, Eddie and I would love to hear about it and see who you'd like to suggest. Listen to us on iHeartRadio. All our podcasts are there. iTunes and Stitcher. And please go to truthbetoldwebtv.com. That's our website. And check out all our upcoming guests. Eddie and I are going to be in 2 weeks from this weekend. We're going to be in Contact in the Desert at a Joshua Tree.
Yay. It's going to be so cool.
No, it's not. Well, we'll probably be in a hotel room. Maybe that. Okay. Not. All right. Well, don't go anywhere. We have John B. Wells coming up in just a minute. Another legend that we're going to be talking to, and hopefully he doesn't think we're going to do 2 hours too. But we could.
Yeah,
we could with John
easy
B. Wells.
with
Easy.
both.
I know. They're so used to it. All right. Thank you guys. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.